Have you ever found yourself lying awake at night, wondering if companionship in old age is truly the key to happiness, or if it might actually be holding you back? I've been a physician for over 35 years, specializing in geriatric care and psychological health. I've sat beside countless older adults, men and women, who've looked me in the eye and said, "Doc, I thought having someone would make aging easier, but it feels like I've traded my freedom for stress." If that strikes a chord with you, then you need to hear this. Today, on Golden Years Balance, we're diving deep into one of the most misunderstood truths of aging: why staying single after 60 might actually be the healthier, happier choice. And don't worry, this isn't about pushing you away from love or connection. It's about opening your eyes to the hidden emotional, physical, and financial tolls that long-term partnerships can take later in life, and helping you decide what truly serves your well-being. So if you're ready to explore 5 powerful reasons why flying solo could be your path to peace, stay with me. By the end of this video, you may never look at relationships the same way again. Reason number 1, the hidden emotional cost of compromise. As Robert shared his story, I couldn't help but feel the weight of his words. Compromise, in its purest form, is meant to be an act of love, a way to meet the needs of others while still honoring our own. But as we grow older, the emotional cost of constant compromise can take a toll in ways we may not immediately recognize. This is especially true for older adults who have spent a lifetime making sacrifices for the people they love, only to find that their own needs and desires have been pushed aside. Robert's story is far from unique. Many of my older patients have shared similar experiences, years spent quietly conceding to the demands of others, whether it's their spouse, children, or extended family. In their youth, they accepted these compromises because it felt like a natural part of maintaining relationships. But as they age, they begin to realize that these small daily sacrifices are no longer just minor inconveniences. Instead, they've become a constant drain on their emotional well-being. One patient, Margaret, told me about the years she spent putting her husband's needs above her own. She took care of him when he was ill, helped him with his business, and never once complained. But as time went on, Margaret began to feel like a shadow of herself. She gave up her own passions and desires, and instead of feeling fulfilled by the love she gave, she started feeling resentful. At 68, after her husband passed away, Margaret was left alone to reflect on a life of selflessness that left little room for her own needs. It was only then that she realized the emotional toll of constantly compromising had left her with a deep sense of unfulfillment. For some, like Robert, it takes a break from the routine, like a few days apart from a spouse, to see how much they've given up. For others, it might take a major life change, such as the loss of a loved one or a dramatic shift in their living situation. But regardless of the catalyst, the result is the same: the realization that decades of self-sacrifice have left a void. One of the most difficult aspects of this hidden emotional cost is that it often goes unnoticed until the person reaches a point of emotional exhaustion. In many cases, people don't realize how much they've given up of themselves until they are faced with the quiet space that comes from being alone or independent. In Robert's case, the simple act of having a few quiet mornings without the constant noise of the TV allowed him to reconnect with himself, to hear his own thoughts, and to feel at peace for the first time in years. That brief respite helped him understand just how much emotional energy he had been expending for the sake of maintaining harmony in his marriage. But there's another side to this story, one that's often even more difficult to confront: the fear of being selfish. Many older adults, especially those who have spent their lives in relationships that demanded compromise, struggle with the idea of prioritizing themselves. They may feel guilty for wanting peace, quiet, or time for themselves, as though this desire somehow diminishes their love for their spouse or family. But the truth is, taking time for self-care and honoring one's own needs is not selfish. It's necessary for emotional well-being. As we age, our physical and emotional resources change. The energy that once seemed limitless becomes more finite, and the need for personal space and time becomes more pressing. When older adults continue to compromise their own needs for the sake of others, They may not only experience emotional fatigue, but also physical symptoms such as chronic stress, anxiety, or depression. The constant tension between what they want and what they feel they must give up can lead to a sense of identity loss, where they no longer recognize themselves outside of their roles as caretakers or partners. For some, like Robert, it takes a break from the routine, like a few days apart from a spouse, to see how much they've given up. For others, it might take a major life change, such as the loss of a loved one or a dramatic shift in their living situation. But regardless of the catalyst, the result is the same: the realization that decades of self-sacrifice have left a void. One of the most difficult aspects of this hidden emotional cost is that it often goes unnoticed until the person reaches a point of emotional exhaustion. In many cases, people don't realize how much they've given up of themselves until they are faced with the quiet space that comes from being alone or independent. In Robert's case, the simple act of having a few quiet mornings without the constant noise of the TV allowed him to reconnect with himself, to hear his own thoughts, and to feel at peace for the first time in years. That brief respite helped him understand just how much emotional energy he had been expending for the sake of maintaining harmony in his marriage. But there's another side to this story, one that's often even more difficult to confront: the fear of being selfish. Many older adults, especially those who have spent their lives in relationships that demanded compromise, struggle with the idea of prioritizing themselves. And they may feel guilty for wanting peace, quiet, or time for themselves, as though this desire somehow diminishes their love for their spouse or family. But the truth is, taking time for self-care and honoring one's own needs is not selfish. It's necessary for emotional well-being. As we age, our physical and emotional resources change. The energy that once seemed limitless becomes more finite, and the need for personal space and time becomes more pressing. When older adults continue to compromise their own needs for the sake of others, they may not only experience emotional fatigue, but also physical symptoms such as chronic stress, anxiety, or depression. The constant tension between what they want and what they feel they must give up can lead to a sense of identity loss, where they no longer recognize themselves outside of their roles as caretakers or partners. Reason number 2, reclaiming lost independence, the unexpected joys of solitude. There's a pervasive myth in our culture that growing old alone is something to be feared. People often imagine that aging without a partner or loved ones nearby leads to inevitable loneliness, emotional despair, and a loss of identity. But there's a significant difference between solitude and loneliness, and this distinction is crucial in understanding how the later years of life can actually bring unexpected joys and personal growth. Take Frank, for instance. At 78, after the passing of his wife, Frank found himself in uncharted waters. He was no longer part of a couple, no longer sharing daily moments with his spouse. For many, this could have felt like an unbearable loss. But Frank didn't wallow in loneliness or dread his solitude. Instead, he discovered a version of himself that he hadn't recognized in decades. For the first time in years, Frank could wake up when he wanted, without concern for someone else's schedule or needs. He was free to pursue his passions without having to compromise or consider the preferences of a partner. One of the first things he did was start cooking for himself again, something he hadn't done much of when his wife was alive. Frank was a fan of experimenting with different cuisines, but during their marriage, his wife had a specific set of dishes she preferred. Now, in the quiet of his kitchen, Frank could cook what he liked, savouring the freedom of choice that had eluded him for so many years. It wasn't just the cooking that brought him joy. Frank had always loved photography, but had put it on hold while taking care of family responsibilities. After his wife's passing, he joined a local photography club. There he found not just a hobby, but a community, a group of like-minded individuals who shared his passion. Through this new interest, Frank not only rekindled his love for photography, but also built connections with others, showing that being single doesn't necessarily mean being alone. When I asked Frank how he felt about his newfound life, he simply smiled and said, "For the first time in my life, I get to be just me." This statement speaks volumes about the power of solitude. It's not about being isolated or disconnected from the world. It's about having the space to rediscover oneself. In the years spent caring for a spouse, raising children, or fulfilling other responsibilities, many people lose sight of who they are outside of their roles. Once freed from these duties, solitude can offer the rare opportunity to reconnect with one's true self, passions, and desires. Being single in later life doesn't mean being alone. It's an opportunity to enjoy the autonomy and freedom that often gets sacrificed in relationships. Without the constant need to compromise or ask for permission, a person can explore new hobbies, interests, and parts of their identity that may have been suppressed or forgotten. This newfound independence is not just liberating, it's a chance to live authentically, to be unapologetically oneself after years of adapting to the expectations of others. The concept of solitude as a choice rather than a burden is a theme often overlooked in our culture. We tend to focus on the idea that companionship is essential for happiness. While companionship can bring joy, it's equally important to recognize that solitude has its own gifts to offer. It gives people the space to reflect, heal, and grow. For many older adults, this is the time to stop being defined by their relationships and start being defined by themselves. Frank's story is not unique. Many older individuals find that after a loss, whether it's the end of a relationship or the passing of a spouse, they have a chance to reclaim their independence. They can set their own schedule, make decisions without consultation, and explore what they truly enjoy. Some may choose to travel, others may delve into creative pursuits, or simply spend time focusing on self-care and personal well-being. This independence can lead to a deep sense of fulfillment as individuals embrace the joy of being in control of their own lives. Of course, solitude comes with its challenges. It can be difficult to adjust to the quiet after years of shared life with a partner. But the key is to recognize that loneliness is a temporary feeling while solitude is a choice, one that, when embraced, can lead to a richer, more fulfilling life. It's about redefining what it means to live well, to age gracefully, and to find peace in one's own company. Frank's journey serves as a reminder that growing older does not have to mean losing oneself. Instead, it can be an opportunity to rediscover what brings joy, freedom, and contentment. So when faced with solitude, remember that it's not a sign of loss, but an invitation to reclaim the most important relationship of all, the one with yourself. Reason number 3, the burden of caregiving. A hidden strain on relationships. Caregiving is often viewed as a noble act of love, but it's also an unspoken form of labor that demands more than just physical effort. As we age, the demands of caregiving can become overwhelming, not only for the caregiver, but also for the relationship itself. In the case of James, his story is a heartbreaking example of how caregiving, while driven by love, can slowly deplete a person's strength, both physically and emotionally. When one partner falls ill, the other often steps into the role of the caregiver, initially without hesitation. It starts with simple tasks, administering medication, preparing meals, or driving to appointments. But over time, the responsibilities pile up. It's not just about the physical tasks. The emotional toll can be just as taxing. The constant need for attention, the vigilance required to monitor health, and the overwhelming sense of responsibility can create a kind of emotional exhaustion that is hard to describe. James' wife's diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease was the beginning of a journey that would change everything for him. As her condition worsened, so did the demands on James. At 77 years old, his own health began to deteriorate under the weight of the caregiving role he had embraced so wholeheartedly. Severe hypertension, sleep deprivation, and weight loss were just a few of the physical consequences he faced. Despite these challenges, he felt guilty for even considering a break. 30 minutes of rest seemed indulgent, even though his body and mind were clearly crying out for respite. This guilt, which many caregivers experience, is one of the hidden burdens of caregiving. It's easy to assume that caregiving is purely an act of selflessness, but in reality, it can feel more like an obligation that has no end in sight. The sense of duty can overshadow personal well-being, leading caregivers like James to neglect their own health in order to meet the needs of their loved ones. They begin to feel that their own needs are secondary, that taking time for themselves is selfish or wrong. But this mindset only exacerbates the problem, leading to burnout. What's particularly challenging is that caregiving isn't a one-time task. It's an ongoing process that can span years. And when both individuals are aging, the strain becomes even more pronounced. The caregiver's own physical and mental health can deteriorate while they try to meet the increasing needs of their partner. The caregiving role is not just about managing someone else's illness. It's about managing an entirely new lifestyle that May Domain the caregiver can give. Over time, it becomes a labor of love that feels like a never-ending cycle of exhaustion and stress. For many, the idea of caregiving starts with love and devotion, but it can soon become a trap. Some patients share with me their feelings of guilt and frustration, telling me they never expected caregiving to take such a toll on them. "I didn't sign up for this kind of suffering," one patient said, their voice tinged with regret. It's a sentiment that many caregivers silently echo as they continue to give without receiving the support they so desperately need. The emotional labor of caregiving is often invisible to others. It's not just the daily physical tasks, but also the constant emotional labor that goes unnoticed. The worry, the fear, and the responsibility can weigh heavily on a caregiver's heart. They often feel like they are constantly walking a tightrope, balancing the needs of their loved one with their own well-being. But the toll this takes on them is rarely acknowledged in society, leaving them feeling isolated and unsupported. Another aspect of the caregiving experience is the loss of self-identity. When you become a caregiver, your life is no longer just about you. It revolves around the person you are caring for, and over time, it becomes difficult to remember what life was like before. The caregiver may begin to feel like they have lost themselves in the process. Their personal goals, desires, and hobbies may fade into the background as the needs of their loved one take precedence. This loss of self can be particularly painful for those who once had a sense of purpose and independence. The strain on a relationship can also be significant. Caregiving shifts the dynamics of a partnership. What was once a balanced, reciprocal relationship becomes skewed as one person takes on the role of the giver and the other becomes the receiver. This shift can create feelings of resentment, frustration, and even guilt for the caregiver. In some cases, it can lead to a breakdown in communication and intimacy as the caregiver becomes more consumed by the responsibilities of caregiving and less able to nurture the relationship in other ways. Ultimately, caregiving in older age is a delicate balance. It's not just about the act of caring for someone. It's about recognizing the toll it takes on the caregiver's health, well-being, and sense of self. It's about acknowledging that caregiving is labor, both physical and emotional, and that the caregiver needs support just as much as the person they are caring for. Without this recognition, caregivers like James will continue to suffer in silence, unable to meet their own needs, while trying to meet the needs of their loved ones. In conclusion, caregiving is a profound act of love, but it is also an immense challenge that can have serious consequences for the caregiver's health and well-being. It is crucial for society to recognise the hidden labour of caregiving and offer support to those who take on this demanding role. Only then can we ensure that caregivers receive the care and compassion they deserve. Reason number 4, emotional exhaustion. When the relationship becomes the stress, even in the most loving and healthy relationships, emotional fatigue can slowly sneak in, often unnoticed at first. At the beginning of a relationship, everything feels new and exciting, and the compromises and adjustments seem small. However, as time goes on, the act of compromising becomes a constant undercurrent. It starts with small, seemingly insignificant decisions, what movie to watch tonight or where to eat dinner. At first, these decisions feel like opportunities to bond, but they can quickly evolve into debates that drain you emotionally. What may have once been playful banter can gradually become another negotiation in a long list of decisions that start to weigh on your mental well-being. The act of suppressing minor annoyances, whether it's your partner's habit of leaving things around or their need for constant reassurance, builds up over time. You love your partner, but love doesn't always mean emotional well-being. This is a hard truth to come to terms with, especially if you've always thought love should bring joy and comfort. But when you feel emotionally exhausted, even the smallest disagreements or daily choices can feel like monumental challenges. This constant juggling of emotions, decisions, and compromises can lead to a type of emotional burnout that leaves you feeling drained, even if there is no clear source of the stress. I've worked with many individuals who only realize the extent of their emotional exhaustion after going through a breakup or experiencing the loss of someone close to them. These moments often bring a surprising sense of relief. For some, the initial reaction isn't one of devastation, but of freedom. The emotional weight that had unknowingly been building up for months or even years finally lifts. It's not that they didn't care about the person or the relationship, but that the constant emotional labor required to maintain the connection had taken a toll on their mental health. It's a realization that the stress of the relationship had become overwhelming, and without it, they feel lighter. The key moment of clarity often comes when they are alone. Solitude brings the space needed to reflect on how much energy had been spent on the emotional demands of the relationship. Without the need to negotiate every little detail, they remember what it was like to make decisions without second guessing. They don't have to consider the other person's preferences at every turn, and they don't have to worry about their partner's moods or reactions before making even the most minor choices. This freedom is often liberating, even if it comes with a deep sense of sadness or guilt about the relationship ending. When the relationship becomes the stress, the emotional cost of constant compromises and unspoken frustrations starts to overshadow the love you feel. Even though you care deeply for your partner, the emotional exhaustion can cloud the connection. In some cases, this leads to the feeling that being single might actually be healthier than staying in a relationship. When you're on your own, you can rediscover the simplicity of living without the emotional strain of constant negotiation. You have more energy for the things that bring you joy, peace, and fulfillment. You can focus on yourself in a way that was not possible while constantly tending to the emotional needs of another person. Of course, this doesn't mean that all relationships are inherently draining. There are relationships where emotional exhaustion is not a common experience, where partners work together in a way that enhances each other's well-being. But in many relationships, especially those that have endured for a long period, it's easy to forget what it was like to simply be yourself without the demands of constantly managing a connection. Emotional exhaustion becomes a silent, steady undercurrent that can erode your happiness without you even realizing it. In some ways, emotional exhaustion in relationships is akin to burnout at work. You go through the motions, you do your best to keep up with everything, but eventually you realize you're running on empty. The love and connection that once felt effortless become tangled in a web of compromises, unmet needs, and unspoken frustrations. The relief that comes with stepping away from that can be a profound reminder of the importance of emotional well-being. While relationships are built on love and mutual support, they also require space, respect, and the ability to honor your own emotional needs. Reason number 5, financial freedom. Avoiding hidden costs in late-life partnerships. Money becomes a delicate issue after retirement. You're on a fixed income, and financial stability takes on new significance when your earning days are behind you. Yet in relationships, especially in late life, financial boundaries can often blur in ways that weren't expected. The very act of sharing your life with someone can bring about hidden costs that can strain not only your finances, but also your emotional well-being. Take Robert, for example. He was a man in his early 70s who had spent years focusing on his health and well-being after his wife passed. He had rediscovered his sense of peace and independence. However, when he entered a new relationship, he hadn't fully accounted for the financial complexities that would arise. His new partner had grown children, all of whom were in various stages of financial distress. They needed help with school fees, medical bills, and even home repairs. What had started as an exciting new chapter in Robert's life soon became a financial burden. His savings, which he had intended to use for his retirement years, was suddenly being used for expenses he hadn't anticipated. "I thought companionship would bring joy," Robert confessed to me one afternoon. "Instead, I'm stressed about money. I feel like I've lost control over my financial future." Robert's situation is not unique. In many late-life partnerships, one partner may be more financially secure, while the other might face financial obligations that could spill over into the relationship. The problem is not just the blending of finances, but also the emotional impact of unexpected financial responsibilities. For example, when adult children or relatives are involved, the partner's resources may no longer feel like their own. They may feel obligated to help, even if it wasn't part of the original plan. This can lead to resentment, stress, and a loss of financial independence. Staying single, on the other hand, often allows for more financial control. You are the sole decision maker in terms of how you spend your money, where you invest, and who you help. You get to set clear financial boundaries without feeling pressured by external expectations. There is no one else to answer to when it comes to how you use your resources, and no guilt if you decide not to lend or share your money. You can maintain the peace of mind that comes with knowing exactly where you stand financially. Furthermore, maintaining a single lifestyle often means there are fewer shared financial responsibilities. There's no merging of debts, no expectation to support someone else's family, and no financial obligations that can unexpectedly arise. You don't need to worry about how your partner's children might, your savings or retirement plans. With fewer external financial pressures, you can direct your funds toward your own health, well-being, and personal goals, which can contribute to a more peaceful, fulfilling retirement. However, it's essential to recognize that staying single also comes with its own challenges. Many people find themselves feeling isolated, and loneliness can sometimes outweigh the comfort that financial independence offers. But when it comes to financial peace, being single often offers a greater sense of clarity and control. You are free to decide what you want to do with your time and money, and if you choose to help others, it's done without the feeling of obligation. For those who are already in a late-life relationship, it's important to have open and honest conversations about finances before any major financial commitments are made. Clear financial boundaries need to be set from the start to avoid the creeping anxiety that Robert felt. Both partners should understand each other's financial situation, including income, savings, debts, and expectations. Having a frank discussion about what financial responsibilities they are willing or unwilling to share can prevent unpleasant surprises down the road. Also, financial planning for the future becomes even more critical as we age. It's important to think about how decisions made today might affect your financial security down the road. Robert, for example, might have benefited from discussing his financial limits with his partner before his savings were stretched thin by helping her children. A financial advisor could also help ensure that his retirement funds are protected and that his assets are managed in a way that supports his long-term goals. In conclusion, while the joy of companionship in later years is a beautiful thing, it's essential to approach it with financial caution. The hidden costs that come with sharing your life and your resources can be significant. Staying single often allows for more financial freedom, offering control over your resources and preventing the stress that comes with unexpected financial obligations. However, those who do choose a partnership must be proactive in setting financial boundaries and having honest conversations about money to ensure their financial independence and peace of mind are preserved. Let's be honest. Society often paints a picture where being in a relationship is the ultimate marker of success. We are conditioned to believe that couples are the ideal. But as a doctor, I've had the privilege of witnessing something far more complex, something that rarely gets discussed. I've seen what's behind the smiles in marriages, the toll that long-term relationships can take. I've seen the chronic exhaustion, the quiet resentment that simmers beneath the surface, and the emotional burden that becomes increasingly difficult to carry with age. But here's the truth that no one tells you. There is a different kind of peace that comes when someone over 60 chooses themselves, when they decide to prioritize their own needs, desires, and well-being over the expectations placed on them by a partner or society. It's not an easy decision, and it doesn't come without its own struggles. However, the transformation that occurs when someone takes this brave step is profound. They start to reclaim their autonomy, their joy, and a deeper sense of fulfillment. They discover that being single in later years doesn't have to be synonymous with loneliness or isolation. Is being single for everyone? No, absolutely not. But should it be feared? Should it be looked at as a negative choice? Absolutely not. As you reach your later years, you've already spent decades fulfilling roles: parent, spouse, caregiver, provider, friend, constantly putting others first. But now it's time to ask, who are you without those roles? Your later years are a precious opportunity for you to focus on you. Choosing peace, choosing solitude, isn't selfish. It's a path of wisdom, healing, and self-love. The myth that happiness depends on another person is just that, a myth. It's far more important to ask yourself if the relationship you're in truly nourishes you. Does it uplift you, or does it drain you? Are you staying because of love or out of habit? You deserve joy, freedom, and the autonomy to live your life as you see fit. And if that means walking alone for a while, do it proudly. Walk with confidence, walk with grace, and most importantly, walk free. If this video resonated with you, I encourage you to like, comment below with your thoughts, and subscribe to Golden Years Balance. We're here to walk with you through every phase of this journey with wisdom, compassion, and truth. Until next time, stay well, stay true to yourself, and embrace the freedom to be you.